Okay, so what are we doing? So we took a test over probabilities, and then we covered 5A, which was the introduction to statistics. So this picture kind of describes what's happening a little bit here. But we start with the population. We take a sample from it. We get a sample statistic, and we make some sort of inference how that pertains to the whole population or population parameter. So knowing those, I think like four things, right? Population, population parameter, sample, sample statistic. Those are all things that are expected after 5A. What else did we have? We had observational studies and experiments. So we can kind of divide things into observational studies where we observe something sort of happening, or we can do an experiment where we're a little more proactive in what's happening. We assign a variable and a control in an experiment. Sometimes studies can line themselves up just like experiments. And if they do, they are called retrospective studies, is the word the book uses. And so if it is a retrospective study, you should be able to give me a, what was it, control and a, wasn't treatment, treatments for experiment. I don't know, there's a control and a variable group. I forget the word that they use. And the other thing, single blind, double blind study, that was it. Are there any questions over anything from 5A? Okay. So in this section, what are we doing? We are continuing talking about statistics. And so this section is called Should You Believe a Statistical Study? So they give us a few criteria, 8 different things to think about, I think, when we look at a study. And so I got them divided up here. So the first thing was what? Get a big picture view of the study. And what does it say? You should understand the goal of the study, the population that was under study, and whether the study was observational or an experiment. So I think they also talk about the surrounding context of the study, right? You have to know the surrounding context of the study. There is a world out there. If this is like clashing with everything else that you know about the world, then it deserves more skepticism, right? I think is one of the points that they make. It's like if it's conflicting with stuff that we already know, to definitely put more scrutiny to it, right? Consider the source. Look for potential sources of bias on the part of the researcher. So who's doing the research, who's paying for the research, that sort of thing. Who's conducting the research, who's publishing it. Look for bias in the sample. So we talked about this last time, but when you select your sample, there's a few different ways you can get bias within the sample. Decide whether the sample method was likely to produce a representative sample. So the goal is to have something that is representative. Look for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. So these are things that you're using like terms that aren't well defined. Are you happy? Are you sad? No, excuse me. How do you measure something like that, right? How does the person, these are things that have sort of a subjective meaning. So if you're using a lot of words that have subjective meaning, that would be problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. Ambiguity in the variables can make it difficult to interpret reported results. So I'm not expecting you to like memorize maybe like these 8 criteria, but if I give you like the thing that's underlined, right, you should know what it's talking about, if that makes sense. I think that's what I did for the quiz and test. I gave you the thing that's underlined, if I remember correctly. Beware of confounding variables. So if the study neglected, so this is a confounding variable, means that there is probably a third thing that you didn't think about. So you're trying to tie two things together. What was it, like lying has a different brain structure or something like that, but maybe there's something else that you didn't think about, a third variable that might be influencing it. The thing, oh, I know, good. There was a study, I think something about like there's a correlation between telephone poles and people getting cancer or something like that. And it was like, well, are the telephone poles causing the cancer? Well, if you look, they're like, I think the people living next to telephone poles were typically living in lower income areas, so they're going to not have the health resources and so on and so on. And you're probably going to find higher occurrences. So income and poverty could like explain like a lot of that sort of stuff. There was a third sort of variable there that wasn't being considered. And so that's what confounding means. It means there's something else you're not considering. Number 6 is what? Consider the setting and wording in surveys. So I think this was, I gave a video for the brain games or something, right? If you watch that, the way in which you word things can be suggestive, right? Basically, look for anything that might tend to produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. So that would be sort of like the leading question. Check that results are presented fairly. Check whether the study supports the conclusions that are being presented in the media. So sort of like when we were talking yesterday about that whole, what was it, the regifting thing, right? And it was like Fox News is claiming that women regift more than men. And like if we look at the margin of error, it did not support what was being said. The last thing that we want to look at is stand back and consider the conclusions. So evaluate whether the study achieved its goal. If so, do the conclusions make sense and have practical significance? So what is being concluded by the study? Any questions about these 8 criteria? So we are going to have a few problems. There's a few ways I guess you can respond, but if you want to talk, it would probably go a little bit faster, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of questions, and I kind of said this yesterday, but there's not like an x equals 32 one sort of solution to these sorts of things. You're going to have to write some English. You're going to have to show me some understanding of this problem. So being able to do math is like only half. It's like half of the math game. The other half of the math game is being able to communicate your idea to people. And so communication is really, really key in mathematics. It's kind of weird sometimes. You do a lot of work to produce this theorem and it's correct, but then you got to go explain it to other people. Otherwise, you're never going to get credit for your work probably. But like getting the idea is half of it. Selling the idea is like the other half of it. It really is, especially in higher math and in higher science in general. You really have to kind of sell your idea and show that it has significance sometimes. Should you believe the study based solely on the information given? Do you have reason to question the results or the methods used in the following hypothetical studies? Explain your reasoning. So, a study by the Liberal Center for American Progress is designed to assess a new Republican budget plan. So, like, which one of those? I feel like most of these, they're really keying in on one of those 8 things. And so I really want you to tell me like which one of those 8 things you think they're trying to talk about, and tell me like how are they talking about it? Why does this apply? Why does that thing apply to this example? So somewhere out there, if you don't have the notes pulled up or something, I would like highly suggest having those eight things like pulled up. It's in your notes for 5B if you want to go grab them. Which one? Okay. So what are they hinting at? Consider the source. How was this consider the source? Why would they be saying that there? When party evaluates an opposing party. Yeah, okay. So I think y'all are hitting at it, getting it. Yeah, the keywords here are, this is a what? Liberal center, and this is a Republican plan, right? So these are opposing parties. So this was, I believe, like number 2 was consider the source. So this one, I believe they're really, really hitting at that number 2, consider the source. Are there questions about this one? So like I said, like I highly suggest you you have that list somewhere. I think my examples are pretty similar. Like there are probably a few things you could tell me, right? We also don't know how they conducted the study, right? So there's probably a lot of things that you could probably tell me that might fit some of the other ones. But I think that like with these 2 words, like this is a liberal center and they're talking about a Republican budget plan. I think they're really, really hinting at like considering the source, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that like you don't believe them. That just means you put probably a little more scrutiny into believing it. That maybe if you know something about statistics, you could look at it, right? And so that's also part of the process, is that if you get something from something that is peer reviewed, that's a bit different than maybe, it depends where they're publishing this too. Okay. But most scholastic journals, they should be peer reviewed. So if something is up and it's been up for a couple of years, and it's usually pretty good sign it lasted through a few peer reviewings. Should you believe the study? A TV talk show host asked the TV audience to text 1 if they support and 2 if they oppose a law requiring background checks for all purchases of firearms. Ooh, that is a neck pop up in there. Okay, so I think this is really hinting at one of them. Although I feel like there's another thing you could probably tell me. Bias in the sample. All right, which one was that? Ooh, so how's this biased in the sample? There are 2 things that in particular, I feel like, that really bias this sample. I feel like it's bias in the sample. It's what I really feel like they're hinting at here. How is that? There's 2 things in particular.
The word support.
No. It's like, how are you pulling people, right? What people are they pulling from? Are they pulling from everyone out there?
No, it's just the people who are in the audience.
That's the one thing. So for one thing, they have to be the TV audience. The second thing is probably not so much limiting anymore, but if you're requiring people to use a telephone, you're limiting to people that have a telephone as well. So one, they have to have a TV. They have to have a TV. They have to be watching the TV talk show, right? So it's got to be a person with the TV. It's got to be the person watching the show. And then they also have to have a phone. So all 3 of those things, I feel like, particularly the fact that they're the TV audience for this particular show, is probably the most limiting factor, right? But yeah, that limits the audience that they're the sample that you're getting, right? It creates a bias in there. what TV talk show is this? They're not saying what talk show it is. So it could be a political talk show, and then you're going to limit your audience in that way as well. The other thing is, I feel like they're giving you a false and limited choice, right? 1, if you support; 2, if you oppose; 3, if you're not going to vote on it, right? You have an option of not to vote on things. Usually when I get these things about how do you voted on something, they're like, haven't decided yet, or something is another option usually. So it feels like they're really limiting your option. So if you said something in the choice of the wording, which one was that? Consider the setting and wording in the survey. Yeah, I would see that there. Because maybe you should have more options. So that is also something I would say would be valid. Consider the setting and wording. Yeah, so yeah, I see how you're saying that now. Funds, bias, okay. Yeah, and they're more likely to hold the same beliefs as, yeah. Yep. Any questions on this one? Like I said, there's no sort of no right one to answer. You could probably tell me any of those things that I said, and it looks like y'all are all kind of hitting it for the most part. So tell me what it is off that list, hopefully. Give me like a number, and then also explain it a little bit. How does it relate to that number? How does this example relate? So that is something that I kind of expect you to do. It's going to be in the homework, it's going to be on the quiz, it's going to be on the test. Guarantee. Okay. See, yeah. Next slide. Slide to the left. Woo. Okay. So same thing. Should you believe the study? Researchers designed 5 survey questions to determine whether Europeans are more optimistic than Americans. So I feel like there's one thing that they're really kind of hinting on here. So think about how you would conduct this. That might help. I don't know. What are you saying? Defining or measuring variables of interest. So how does that apply to this? Ooh, is that true? Are you more optimistic? What do we ask them? Are you happy? Something like that, right? This is like the happiness thing. Are you happy? Are you more optimistic? What is optimistic? How many optimistics? 3 optimistics? 4 optimistics? How many optimistics are you, right? Doesn't make any sense if I say something like that. There's no like really strong way to measure optimism, right? So how are you going to measure optimism, I guess is the question, right? Brain scan? I don't know. You'd have to actually like create the structure and understand what the structure was before you did that, though, I think. Are there questions about this one? Characteristics are immeasurable. Yeah, that was the what do they call it? Consider the source. They don't. Yeah, so I guess that's a good thing you might want to do. It doesn't say who did the research here. So if it was Europeans doing the research versus if it was Americans, would be a valid thing to look at. I really feel like with the language, they're really like they're leaning into this thing right here, not being measurable. Problems defining variables of interest. That's what it was called. What was that number? 4? Yeah. So I think it was number 4 was look for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. And it's really because of that word optimism, right? Optimism is not something that is like strongly measured. It's not really well defined. What's up? Excuse me. What's optimistic for one person might not be for another, right? Any questions about this problem? Are we getting this stuff? Do you think you could write me something semi-decent enough? Oh, man. Okay. So preferably write it neat enough for me to read the stuff. Some people like, I don't know, man. Y'all are zigzagging around on a page, and it's like you realize I got to grade hundreds of problems. Each assignment I assign, it's like hundreds of problems I got to look at. I'm not trying to find the problem. Just being honest with you. Oh, man. You can use multiple papers in math. It'd be all right. Should you believe this claim? An educational research group that tracks tuition rates finds that tuition at a particular small college is 50% more than it was 10 years ago. So it says, based solely on the information given following that study, should you believe this claim? I think the instructions are maybe a little bit different here. Is this a believable claim? What are y'all saying? Yeah, this is what the book says. The book changes the instructions maybe a little bit. We're not necessarily just looking for bias. I mean, we are, but they could also be giving you like a valid claim. And what the book says is like, this is good. So maybe if you wanted to be like really nitpicky, you might want to ask who the educational research group is. Maybe consider the people doing it. But for the most part, if it's an educational research group, it's probably done by like grants. It's probably done in a fairly scrupulous manner, I would assume. They're going to track tuition rates, and at a small college, it's 50% more than it was 10 years ago. That sounds kind of low. This was probably an old problem or something. It's probably going up more than that, but maybe not. Definitely sounds like something reasonable. Are there any questions on this one? Whew. Okay. How many people are going to answer? 7? Yes. 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 Yeah, they could tell you what college it was on, I guess. I think the book's going to say it's reasonable, is what they said. What are we on? Let me see. Okay. Bias. Identify at least one potential source of bias in the following studies or claims. Explain why the bias would or would not affect your view of the study or claim. So grocery shoppers on a Saturday morning are invited to taste test orange juice and vote for their favorite brand. Oh man, has this changed? Are they talking about like pre-apocalypse or like post-apocalypse grocery shopping? Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel like the big thing with the bias in this one is probably that word. Right? You're doing Saturday morning. Are they doing it? The other thing, I guess, like, are they doing, it doesn't really say. Are they doing a blind taste test? Because if you're not doing a single blind taste test and people see the brand, it can affect the way that they vote. Yeah, so you're going to get Saturday morning shoppers. You're not going to get people that are hungover on a Saturday morning, I guess. Would it not affect your view? I don't know. That's a hard one to know. I guess it's more of a personal question, huh? I'd say it'd probably be fairly accurate. I don't feel like people just that wake up early would necessarily have a different taste preference than people that come out late at night, but I could be wrong. I would probably want to do it at different times in the day to have a more accurate representation, though, to make sure of that, because I would have no clue whether or not that's true. So better to be safe than sorry is what I would say. Because if I were doing this, I would do it at probably different times of the day. Although I wouldn't say that necessarily completely neglects the study. It tells you what early morning people like. We could always figure out if people that wake up later in the day like something else. I would say it also depends what grocery store they're going to. That's also a potential bias. Although it doesn't, like, I feel like it really hints at like the Saturday morning. They explicitly put this in here. A lot of the stuff I'm saying is stuff that is like maybe a bias because they left it out and didn't tell us. That's a bit of a different story, I think. And right, it says orange juice. I guess it's like people that only like orange juice. You also have this thing that it's got to be people that like are going to accept this invitation. There's that voluntary nature that's coming from the people that are taking it. We're not going and like subjecting people to this. You know, it's like, would you volunteer to do this for us? So you're only going to grab certain people, and it's going to produce a bias there of people that are actually wanting to volunteer to do it. Probably not as bad here as if you're going into the mall on like a Saturday morning and making them fill out like 100-page questionnaire, right? You're only going to get like really weird people that want to do that. Here, like, this is probably a little bit more normal, right? You'll probably get a little bit less bias on something like this than like the 100-page questionnaire. Vote for your favorite brand. Okay. Questions about this? Do you think you could write something that's cogent? Something that is satisfactory? Okay. I feel like today might go a little quick. Okay, so we're looking for bias. Where's the bias in this thing? An article in the Journal of Nutrition noted that chocolate is rich in flavonoids. The article reports that regular consumption of food rich in flavonoids may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. The study received funding from Mars Inc., the candy company, and the Chocolate Manufacturers Association. Oh boy. What could ever be wrong with this? How's that biased? Consider the source. Yeah. This one should be pretty obvious, I hope, right? What is the Journal of Nutrition? Is that an actual, like, you have to look at these sources too, right? Like if you Google like Journal of Nutrition, is that an actual legit like scholastic source, or is that just some kind of bullshit journal that Mars Inc. created to publish their study? So looking at the study and looking at the credibility of the news source too is also something you might want to do. There are organizations that hire think tanks. What was it? The Center for Consumer. I forget what they changed their name every so years. They're just like they're 2-bit con men is basically what they are. Center for Consumer Freedom, I think is what they're called. Yeah, that's what it's called. It was like run by the guy named Richard Berman, and his kid was like a pretty famous musician, and his guy is just like he's a propaganda master is what he is. And like his kid committed suicide. Like it's kind of sad, but he definitely like did not get along with his dad, and I think that was probably part of it. He struggled because his dad was like this guy that just disbanded propaganda, you know, and it's kind of a hard thing to live with, I guess. So there are con men out there. Beware, right? Make sure you Google like the magazine that they're talking about. Make sure it's actually a legitimate source and not just some like shill for a con man, basically. And I think this one's pretty obvious, right? Mars Inc. and what Chocolate Manufacturers Association, they're the ones producing the study. Does it necessarily mean that the study's a bad study? No, it could be good, but it definitely deserves a bit more scrutiny, right? You shouldn't probably just take it at its face value. Take it with a little bit more grain of salt, and if you can, actually read into it and what they did. Oh, look, they've done studies. 60% of the time, it works every time. Okay. Okay, so it's all in the wording. Princeton Survey Research Associates did a study for Newsweek magazine illustrating the effects of wording in a survey. 2 questions were asked. Do you personally believe that abortion is wrong? And then the second question is, whatever your personal view of abortion, do you favor or oppose a woman in this country having the choice to have an abortion with the advice of her doctor? To the first question, 57% of the respondents replied yes and 36% replied no. In response to the second, 69% of the respondents favored allowing women to have the choice and 29 opposed. Allowing question, 24 opposed allowing women to have the choice. Discuss why the two questions produce seemingly contradictory results. How could the results of these questions be used selectively by various groups? Okay. So I think the keyword in this first one is probably like this one, right? And the keywords in this one are probably these two things. So the first one is phrased as like a pro-con sort of abortion is really the word that it focuses on. The second one is really focusing on women's choice and women having a choice over their body and over their abortion. So what else did they say? To the first question, 57. Yeah. Okay. So obviously people aren't going to be against a person's free will or choice, right? And so when you phrase it as a sort of like free will choice, you're going to get a higher percentage of people that respond positively. But also these aren't like mutually exclusive questions, right? You can believe that abortion is wrong, but still believe maybe women should have the right to it, and vice versa. I think you can believe that there's nothing wrong with abortion and still, I guess that's kind of a weird thing, not believe women should do it. I mean, it is possible, and they're probably not very likely, but I mean, it's still possible to have those two beliefs. There's someone out there that probably does. Discuss why the two questions. Someone say something?
So yeah, so our answer is supposed to be kind of like emphasizing the difference between like the rhetoric in question 1 and question 2. That's what our answer is supposed to be.
Yeah. So you're just discussing like basically what's the difference between the way that they're phrasing things. How could the results of those questions be used selectively by various groups? So if you are if you believe that abortion is wrong, you're probably going to ask them this question, right? If you're anti-abortion group, this is probably your go-to question here. If you are a women's rights advocate group, you are probably going to go right to here and ask them this question. Are there any questions about this one? Which side? Yeah, I think the key word here is that this question is really focusing on abortion, and this one is phrasing it as a woman's rights issue. So if you ask if someone's pro-rights, they're going to obviously answer positively more so, right? It's on kind of how you're being primed. And the key word here is also that they're also priming them with the word wrong, right? They could ask them, what is your moral choice on abortion or something like that, right? They could ask this a lot of ways without using this word wrong, which steers them into saying, yes, it is wrong. We typically like to agree with the surroundings and the people around us, right? I think it's a preservation mechanism. Do you favor? That's leading them to answer yes. So one, I think it is about the abortion versus the women's rights, but there's also these words like wrong and do you favor? And those things lead people into answering either negatively, nay, right, or answering positively, yes. And this also, I think it like you get that advice of a doctor, you also get that weird sort of, there's an authority figure here. We're very much respondent to like those authority figures agreeing with things. If you go study Milgram's experiment, he did some stuff with that. Any questions about this one? Are we getting this? Y'all are awfully quiet, and we're going pretty quick.
I think it's because most of these are answers, and we kind of had a huge grip on it yesterday.
I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not.
that's good to hear. Hopefully the work follows. Okay, accurate headlines. Consider the following headlines. I can't even read anymore. Consider the following headlines, each followed by a brief summary of a study. Discuss whether the headline accurately represents the study. So, drug shown in 98% of the movies is the headline. The story summary is a government study claims that drug use, drinking, or smoking was depicted in 98% of the top movie rentals. So this, I think they got some good pointers on this thing, right? When papers write headlines, they're writing stuff that really grab your attention. So sometimes they can be a little misleading to what's actually happening. Probably really obvious now that there's this thing called social media, and you can you can always look at those comments if you feel like you loathe yourself enough to like actually care what other people are saying. What are y'all saying? Top movie rentals is not all movies. That's true. That's true. If we look at all movies, it'll probably be like 99%, right? All those indie films. Okay. Yeah, I think the thing here is that they're saying 98% of movies and 98% of top movies, keyword here being top. You're not talking about every single movie. That's it. Are there any questions about this? The Associated Press. Usually when you see the Associated Press, you can believe them. It's been verified pretty well. Any questions? Pretty sure like Associated Press is like the big organization that verifies. I don't think they're actually a news source per se. I think they're the thing that verifies the news source, but I could be wrong. Yeah. Are there any questions about this? I think this is the final slide.
We have one more question and then that's it.
No, that's it.
One more. I think it's after this one and then that's it.
Okay. What is the question? Discuss the difference between the following questions, each of which could be the basis for a statistical study. Oh yeah, this one. What percentage of internet dates lead to marriage? What percentages of marriage begin with internet dates? So I think let's take this first question first. If I wanted to do the statistical study, what is my population here? What am I drawing from? that a weird thing to ask? You're drawing from all internet dates on the first one. Is that what you're saying? What percentage of internet dates? Yes. So I think I'm going to all my internet dates. Oh, come on back, annotations. Population here on my first one, this blue one. I'll color code it, I guess. I'm going to go all internet dates. And the question I'm going to ask, right, or my population parameter or statistic, I guess I'll just go with statistics. That way, it's going to be the same in the sample and the population. So the question I'm going to ask is, are you married, right? That would be that one. The other one, which is, let's go with green. This guy. What percentages of marriages? The population I'm drawing from here is going to be the opposite. And I'm going to ask them kind of like the opposite question. Go with green. So my population here is an internet dates. It's going to be what? Married couples. So I go to all married couples. And the question here is what? Did you meet on internet? On the interwebs. Any questions?
I don't know if it's just the wording, but for some reason I'm really confused on how to exactly answer this.
So what percentage of internet dates lead to a marriage? So where are we starting here? We're starting with people that started, ooh, get out of here. We're starting with people that started with internet dates and then they got married. So we want to know everyone that went on an internet date. We go to them and we ask them, did you get married? This says what percentage of marriages begin with internet dates. So this we're looking at all marriages. And then we're seeing if they began with an internet date. I think it has to do with like this percentage of, it tells you where you're drawing from. So this tells you the bottom number, right? Percentage of this thing. This tells me the base, the denominator that I'm going to draw from. This is going to give me my numerator, I think. This many marriages out of this many total internet dates. This many internet dates out of all the marriages.
Okay, I get it.
Okay. Any more questions about this? Okay. All right, so we have a little bit of time. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go do that research paper is what I want you to do. Are there any questions over the research paper? Okay, so this is the thing, another thing. Someone just dropped out, but hopefully they'll listen to this. One thing I want to say is I know I've been accepting like late work, unless it's just turned in like after we take the test for that section. I've been grading it for the most part. If you're turning it in after we take a test on it, it's a little too late, man. This is the second to last week. We're about to hit the last week. The last week, there's not going to be any late work. Like the last week is the last week. So don't, if you're like behind on something or something, like now's the time to get caught up. We got one more section and we have a test. So definitely do not turn stuff in like late. I haven't been accepting stuff after test anyway, like I said, for the most part. If you're turning it in more than like a day late after the test or so, I think I've been counting it off. Any questions or anything? We are almost there. Not too many more classes. Okay, I'm going to hit stop on the record then.